Hello and welcome. You are listening to Getting Up to Code, an Energy Code podcast for commercial and residential contractors and code officials, and anybody who just loves the Utah Energy Code. Today we are here talking to Brent Ursenbach regarding Energy Code and legislation. Hello, Brent.
Hi, Jacqueline. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks.
So, in the recent legislation that we just had, the 2021 Commercial Code went through legislation, and we now have that as our Energy Code. But the residential stayed at the 2015 Energy Code with our amendment. Is that correct?
That's correct. The Energy Code in Utah took a big change back in, I think it was about 2010, about 13 years ago. At that time, let me back up a little bit.
Okay.
The code is rewritten or updated every 3 years. So we have the International Code Council, ICC, and they update their codes every 3 years. And so we had a 2006, we had a 2009, 12, 15, which is we're on for residential energy, 18 and 21. So over the years previous to the 2009 code, we have a Uniform Building Code Commission.
Okay.
And it's a group of volunteers that the state asks to review the codes. Well, this Building Codes Commission has what they call advisory committees. And so they have an architectural advisory committee, a mechanical advisory committee, a plumbing advisory committee. And so they have these various committees that they ask them to review the codes, and they review the codes, they make a recommendation to the Building Codes Commission,
Okay.
and then the Building Codes Commission would make a recommendation to the governor.
Okay.
And the governor would typically just do what the Building Codes Commission asked him to do. Well, in the 2009 code, fire people from across the United States, and this is from manufacturers and everybody else, they got together and they decided that they were going to push fire sprinklers in residential dwellings.
Okay.
And so they went to the code hearings, ICC code hearings, and flew in a bunch of fire officials, and they were able to load the hearings with enough members to actually adopt fire sprinklers into the residential code. And so since 2009, we have had fire sprinklers in the residential code for every single family dwelling.
Wow.
Well, across the country, this was not a good thing, because this adds a big expense. And so Utah, among a bunch of other states, says, you know what, we're going to change this. And so at that point, the Utah legislature passed a bill that gave them the authority to adopt
Instead of giving it to the governor.
instead of the governor. So the legislature now listens to the recommendation of the Building Codes Commission,
Okay.
and then they decide what they want to do based on their membership, the lobbyists that have their ear and such. And so the good thing is, and I believe it was a good thing, they amended out the sprinklers.
Yeah,
So those fires.
And that would have been in safety, right?
And they're a little safer, but it's a big, big expense.
Yeah.
And really, we don't have a lot of deaths in homes with fires, because if they have working smoke detectors and such. And so I didn't see that. I thought the whole process was kind of broken, and ICC changed the process since then. They won't allow anybody that had their way paid to go to the hearings.
Oh, okay.
And so they kind of fixed the process after the barn door had been left open.
Okay.
So anyway, it changed code adoption in Utah, and the legislature adopts the code. They have some influential lobbyists that are able to influence the code. And every 3 years we adopt the commercial codes. There's no problem. There's very few amendments. We adopt the International Building Code, the Plumbing Code, the Mechanical Code, the electrical codes from NEC, National Electrical Council, and it's on a little bit different, it's 1 year different, but we adopt all those codes. But the residential code and the home builders has a pretty powerful lobby,
Yeah.
And so they push legislation that supports them. And the big thing that they've been opposed to since in 2009 was energy code, because they thought the energy code was adding undue expense to the cost of a house. So with 2009, there were some things in the energy code. One specifically was equipment trade-off.
Yeah.
With 2006 code, you could build a weaker wall assembly and put in a high-efficiency furnace and get credit for the high-efficiency furnace.
Okay.
And then you didn't have to build as good a wall.
Yeah.
Well, in 2009, they decided, the ICC and everybody that was in that process, they decided that we are going to take away that equipment trade-off. We have one chance to build a wall right, so we're going to make a code that you have to build a good wall.
Yeah. But
Well,
ours amended or
exactly.
that's the trade-off then, right? Is we don't have to do the wall if we do a good furnace. So that's kind of that's what you're talking about?
That's exactly, yeah, and we've talked about that, and we've discussed this in classes. So yeah, so we didn't even adopt a 2009 code, energy code.
Oh.
They didn't adopt either commercial or residential. Well, that really caused problems for the commercial side. And so in 2012 came around, they decided, well, we'll adopt the 2012 commercial energy code, but we're not going to adopt a residential code until we have a way to bring that equipment trade-off back into the picture.
Oh, okay.
And so we now have it's called a Utah 2012 res check. So a special res check made for Utah by DOE that gives you an equipment trade-off.
And so currently we're on the residential 2015 code, correct? But we're still using the 2012 res check?
That's right.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that, because I was like, that's not, like, how does it calculate for the 2015 code and a 2012 res check?
Yes. So with this 2012 code, so of course, when the legislature passed the 2012 adoption, it was into 13 when they did that, and then they made it contingent upon DOE making us that new res check.
Okay.
So we had to petition DOE to make a res check just for Utah, and they did one for 6 or 7 other states. And so they wrote us that 2012 res check. So 15 comes around, and it was just a couple of years later, and they said they recognized that the code needs to progress a little bit. And so what they said was, well, we'll still use the 2012 res check, but you have to pass by 3%.
Okay.
And then a couple of years later, you have to pass by 4%. And so in 2021, we went to 5%. Okay. So we have this weakened res check that allows the equipment trade-off. You just have to pass, you cannot pass by 0, you have to pass by 5%.
Okay. So they increased the percentage in which you have to pass the res check.
Yep.
And to be more compliant with
Right.
the trade-off.
Right. And when we compare it with the 2015 res check, the standard res check that the rest of the country would follow,
Yeah.
it's between 5 and 10% less efficient than the 2015. So the 12 res check allows, like I say, the weaker wall or weaker windows or whatever, and you trade it off with a better furnace. But you can't fix those walls later very easily. It's really costly.
Yes. And so the legislation, so they're looking at a code that was developed by the DOE? Like whose code are they looking at that offers the amendments that the council is going over?
Okay.
Is that the AEE or?
Okay, so.
Sorry, I'm probably
No, that's
weird
okay.
question.
Most people don't understand how the process works. So the codes are developed by ICC, International Code Council. And the ICC will allow anybody to propose a change to the code.
Okay.
I probably have 6 or 7 things in the code that I proposed that are in the code now. I've probably tried about 25, but they didn't go through. And so
Yeah.
what they do is that you submit it to ICC. They have a code development hearing where it's heard by a committee. They say yes or no. If they say no, you can still ask to make a public comment.
Yeah.
And so you have a second chance. Everything that they approved automatically goes on to a final action hearing. If you submit, to oppose what they said,
Okay.
you can do that, but you have to pass by like 2/3 or something when it gets to the vote.
Okay.
So we have the committee hearings, and then we have the final hearings, and the final hearings are before the membership of ICC,
Okay.
and then they vote on it. So it's a long process. It takes about 3 years to get through it. So the 21 code was just adopted, but the 24 code's already been written and finished. So they're starting to work on the 27 code right
wow.
now. So we're always at least 5-6 years behind with our current codes. So let me jump back just a little bit. So in 2012, we had got the 2012 res check. Then in 2015, they said, okay, well, you have to pass, on this sliding scale, a little bit more. But the legislature also decided, you know what, that's a burden for the home builders to have to learn a new code every 3 years, so we're going to skip a code cycle. And so we didn't adopt anything in the 2018 code as far as residential. They have gained enough wisdom that we do adopt the commercial code because no one's opposed to the commercial code.
Okay.
So every 3 years we're adopting the commercial code. So this year, January 2023, was when we heard discussion on adopting the 21 codes. And so all the 21 codes are being adopted July 1 this year, 2023, except for residential energy. So we actually have gone 6 years on the 15 code, and we're going to go at least another year. And so potentially we will adopt it based on discussions and everything that are going on right now, trying to meet a middle of the road.
So we did not adopt 2021 residential this year. But you said next year. So does that mean because every 6 years it will be up for discussion next year because we didn't do anything instead of every other code cycle and having to wait another 3 years for a discussion? Or are they just talking about amendments and making it better for next year?
That's a great question. So they did adopt the commercial IUCC
Yes.
and all the other 21 codes.
Okay.
And the Building Code Commission and the Mechanical Advisory Committee, who makes the recommendation on the energy code, prepared they spent months and months, and I assisted them. They asked me to help.
Yeah.
And we put together, concessions and everything. And when it got to the session, they said, you know what, we're not going to do that. But they did adopt the remainder of the residential code.
Okay.
So they adopted the building portion, the plumbing portion, the mechanical portions, all those portions. They simply did not adopt the residential energy portion.
Okay.
So that's
the only piece that
that's the
was
only
missing.
piece. And so, it'll be 7 years that we're on that, and they did say they would consider it next session. Whether they do or not, we'll see. And, we had people in our recent class that are on that, on one of the advisory committees to that are working on that. So we'll see. Maybe next year we will adopt the 21 residential code, but it will definitely have a lot of amendments.
Amendments in it.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll have more amendments than we currently have in our code, or?
Actually, there's going to be more amendments that really don't impact us as much as some of the others. I'm hoping that we address mechanical ventilation. We don't have mandatory mechanical ventilation. Our homes are getting too tight. We need to ventilate them better. And
Okay.
Coming out of COVID and stuff, we all know that we need fresher, cleaner air in our house.
Yes.
And without amendments, every house would have mechanical ventilation, a system that's always exchanging air in your house. I hope we get that. I hope we get a little bit better, with the walls. There are some things in the 21 code, like in lighting, adding occupancy sensors and a number of things like that in a residential
I
home.
was going to say in a home.
Yeah, and I think those will be amended out. And I really don't have a lot of heartburn over there. And, you know, there's a few things that I don't think are as critical. You know, they're looking to take insulation from R49 to R60 in an attic. It really doesn't make that much difference. You know, that's something that we propose. No, we don't. We're okay. We'll stay back on, you know, the R49.
Yeah.
But there's going to be some amendments. I wish we would just adopt it. It would be so much cleaner. But
Just
then
to get the res check through or the 2021 code would mean more HERS raters and more blower door testing would be
Right.
done if we adopted straight across.
we would have a better, healthier home, more efficient, healthier home. And with the amendments, it's just so confusing. You know, we have a quick guide, you know, that we use that we'll maybe talk about in another podcast that has all this red in here because it's the amendments, and people have to get a hold of the copy of the State Construction and Fire Codes Act so they can see the amendments and try to merge them together. The word is that ICC is actually going to print a Utah IRC, International Residential Code, that has the amendments in it. So
That would be great
if
to
they
see.
do, that'll make it a little bit better. But
Yeah, it'd be easier to find for
Yeah.
sure for everyone.
yeah, so less amendments would obviously I think would be ideal.
Yeah.
Especially because we're uniform across the country then. But we do what we can, and we have a passion for building a better home, so we fight the battle.
Well, we do have wonderful energy nerds that are rooting for the energy code and are being great advocates for the state of Utah to promote going more efficient in our energy code. And I think it's great for all you and everybody else that's involved on that committee to take the time, since it is volunteer your time to being involved in that, because it sounds like it's a huge process
really is.
in order to have those meetings and get that
Yeah.
through. So thank you to you and the wonderful volunteers on that committee
Well,
for
thank you.
putting the energy into that.
Thanks so much.